Casting your own metal moulding box sides. Part 5, casting the first 10 sides. We have our 10 moulds sitting here, ready to pour, and shortly we'll light up. It's a bit of an odd collection of moulding boxes, but we'll see how we go. I've got the furnace sitting here, ready to go. I've got an A90 crucible in it. I won't actually fill that crucible. I'll probably only get it about half full because it'll hold 33 kilos of aluminium, and we won't really need all of that. But shortly, after I've had a bit of lunch, I think, we'll light up and we will see if we can make some castings. Hopefully we will. Okie dokie, we'll get some blower on here. And then we'll see if we can light up. And with a bit of luck, here we go. There we go. They always start a little smoky, and you have to be very careful turning them down up front or they'll go out. But that looks all right. That'll be stable now for a while. We'll just wait until it all gets good and gooey. I'll now flux the metal. Just get this out of the way. Set that there to stay warm. Woohoo, boy. Get the worst of the crud off the top of it first. Not degas the metal, flux. I didn't say degas, did I? Just get this off. Haven't got a full crucible. I won't really need a full one for this. Get that stuff off. That'll do for the moment. A little bit of flux in. I'd normally have a fan on here to pull the fumes out of the shed because it doesn't do very much for your tin roof. But anyway, whatever. So you just lightly sort of rabble it into the surface. You don't viciously stir it or anything like that. Just sort of do this, and at first it melts, and you can probably just see that maybe. That's when it does its cleaning action. And then over the next minute or two it exotherms a bit, and that helps dry the flux out, so you get a nice dry flux. Now you will have possibly noticed that I haven't actually degassed this metal. I've no intention of for this job. I mean, it's not an aerospace job. There's nothing on it that's machined to a very high standard. You won't see a little bit of gas anyway. It's very thin. Any gas will be quite fine. And frankly, a little bit of gas probably helps with the shrinkage, because this is a part with very little feed I've got on it. So a little bit of gas, it might help a bit. You know, I think a lot of people just get a bit too obsessive compulsive about gas, and what they really think is gas is more likely to be air bubbles that they've got caught in their casting because they've used absolutely extremely poor gating methods. Huge sprues, great high things. The metal splashes and plops down in there and traps the air. Typically gas bubbles are less than 0.5 millimetre, but air bubbles, well, they can be anything up to the size of your fist, I guess, in a big casting, but usually you find them 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, that sort of size, even 3/8. But, you know, that's had probably long enough now. That looks pretty hot to me. Maybe too hot. It certainly does look a bit warm. It's always a bit of a guessing game, this. You turn the furnace off and you still get heat soaking in through the crucible and soaking in from the furnace walls. And the crucible will, the metal will often pick up in temperature quite a lot. I mean, I turned this off at about 760. I very much suspect that's now up around 800 by the look of it. I'll find out in a minute. Which case we might have to wait a little while it cools down a bit. All right, seems to have cooled down a little bit by now. It's down at a little bit below 760, which is about where I want it. So I think at this stage we'll go for it and see what happens. Just a final flick of the stuff off the top of the metal. Okay. Little shield here. Okay. Now, let's see how we go here. A little bit too far out. Never mind. I need to get this fast because this is a fairly big sprue. Whoa, look at that. There we go. I reckon that's pretty good. Oh. We'll get this one a bit quicker. Yeah. Now what I haven't done, of course, put the exothermic on. It's all right. Clean the ladle a bit. Now this is with quite a small sprue, this one. But it looks good. Bit more, I think. I don't think I'll make that with that little bit. And again, full. That's the shot. Now these ones have got a big sprue, so I've got to pour a lot harder to keep it full, but it'll go down in that mould a lot quicker. There's one. And here's the second one. That's the way I like to see them pour, full as a goog all the way. Give this a bit of a clean again. Right. Back to the small sprues again. These are only the smallest sides, and I reckon we'll get the second one out of that one. I hope. Gonna look damn silly if we don't. There we go. Last two. Come on, fill her up. There we go. Notice I'm virtually chucking the metal in to start with to get it full. That's it. And now for those of you who like seeing ingots poured, here we go. But I can assure you, I am not polishing the ingots. Even if they're good ingots, I'm not going to polish them. That, in my opinion, is polishing a turd, but there you go. Each of us to our own. It's a bit hot there. Boy, I sure melted a bit more than I needed. This means I've got to bail it out, of course, doesn't it? Oh, bubble, bubble. Yeah, gee whiz. Oh, there's a lot in there yet. I'll have to bail that out progressively. I'll go get one of the bigger ones. because they're the ones that I'm most worried about, because they're the longest. I think it should be alright. It seemed to take a lot of metal. And of course, it is brute ugly heavy. Tongs, what did I do with the tongs? Thank you. Looking good. Yep, beautiful myrtle, beautiful. Poured a bit hot if anything, but I'd rather have them hot and run than too damn cold and not run. Now the next brute ugly heavy one is as these push the friendship. Boy, do they ever. That's a bit lighter. Not much, but a bit. Thanks. Well, here are our first 10 castings. Just 6 more to go. I thought we'd have a quick look at them to see what we can learn, because I tried a few different things with these. You may remember I tried 2 different sprue sizes. There's a 10mm sprue, and there's an 8mm sprue, and a bigger pouring basin to match the bigger sprue. It would appear to me, by the way that everything ran, that the smaller sprue is more than satisfactory, and in the future castings that's what I'll use. The other thing I did was to pour these at around about 550 to 555 degrees centigrade, which is on the warm side. Again, they seem to have run very well. They've sort of filled all the corners. There's not the slightest sign of any tendency to misrun. So I'll drop the temperature next time probably to about 740 degrees. The other thing I do notice is that some of these, it looks to be a bit marginal where it's fed from the feeder into the casting. So on some of these I will next time use a slightly bigger feeder, I think. But basically all that has to be done now with these is cut off. And there's 3 ways. The old-fashioned way, the brutal way, and the way I'll use, of course, the bandsaw. When you're cutting off, particularly if you're cutting off with one of these things, be a little careful, because it's not uncommon, if I can get it here. This is one I've already cut off, and I've sanded it up, filed up. Now you'll notice that around here there's a little bit of a drawdown into the casting. This is quite common around gate connections, and if you've got one of these brutes of things and you decide that you're going to clean all this mess up, what you'll wind up with is a casting that's dipped like that, and that's not what we want. Later on I'm going to try and organise it so that when the boxes are put together, the gate sides are to gate side, in case there's any slight unevenness here. I think this surface will be the better and the straighter. Now also note, of course, that these boxes are, there's a taper on the side, there's a draft there to allow you to get them out of the sand. We've put this draft deliberately in the direction that means that the inside of the box is slightly wider than the outside. The idea of that is that when you come to strike the sand off, you'll be striking it off along that edge, and it'll give you a nice clean strike off. You may remember that on the larger one I did one without the odd side pieces and I hand cut. And I said to you at the time that you never quite get the parting line right, and as you can see I didn't. We've got quite a bit of flash here where I didn't quite cut it right. And on this end too, in fact it's even a bit worse, although I don't know what happened with that bit. And here's its mate that I did use the odd side pieces for, and you can see that generally it's much, much better. Now, I only did that to demonstrate how to do it for those people who are going to make their own patterns out of wood because they don't have a 3D printer and they won't be able to 3D print the odd sides. You can make up your own odd sides, I guess, and I firmly recommend that you do, because it's much easier to work with that than that. But anyway, they all worked well. Remember that this was the one where the pattern is almost straight off the 3D printer, an absolute minimum of sanding. The only thing I do notice is that these little grooves that we put in here in order to indicate the centre for later drilling of the pinholes and slots, etc., came out a little bit better where we finished them a bit nicer. I mean, there is a difference here, I think, that you can sort of see between the two, because this one had been finished and painted, this one hadn't been. Anyway, the next stage, I cut them all off, file them all up, get them into the heat treat oven. That's not strictly necessary, but I know what this alloy is. It is a heat treatable alloy, so I will give it a quick heat treat. And then we'll move on to the next stage of actually finishing boxes off and assembling them, pinning them, bolting them and all that sort of stuff. Okay, I poured the next 6 castings to complete this list of 16 that we need, but unfortunately I've had a couple of disasters. First of all, let's look at this one. I've had loose sand fall in the mould here, and I'll show you where I think that came from in a minute, but of course it's completely destroyed the casting. I can't use that, it's destroyed the bolt hole, it looks absolutely terrible, so we'll scrap that one and I will simply have to redo it. This one is something else again. It has a series of problems. It would appear that it hasn't actually run, but I don't think that's quite what's really happened here. There's this strange effect here where it's very, very smooth, and we have these areas here where I believe steam has come out of the sand, and the sand was rammed so hard because I used my pneumatic rammer a bit too much and a bit too viciously, trying to ease the strain on my tired old body. The sand is virtually non-porous at all, no permeability whatsoever, and it's given this sort of almost glass-like finish there. But unfortunately, no air has been able to get out of the sand and the steam hasn't been able to get out, so I've produced these weird defects. These are something else again. These are rat tails, and they're caused by the sand expanding when it gets a bit above 500 centigrade, and it changes its crystalline shape and it expands, and this is the weakness of silica sand for moulding materials. The sand where the metal flows over gets hot and expands, and the result is you get these sort of lines in the casting, and here are a couple of even worse ones, but they also would appear to be associated with this over ramming of the sand. I assume this is the same sort of thing, that I've rammed it so hard there's no permeability in the sand at all. And I mean, other than that, it's a nice looking casting, but it's useless and I'll have to remold it, and I won't use the sand rammer quite as much, I don't think. I'll be a little more gentle with it. Also, another thing that causes these, or sorry, a way of getting rid of these defects, and here's a couple of even worse ones. You can see them here. They're very, very bad. Another way of getting rid of these expansion defects is that you put something in the sand to absorb the expansion. Traditionally wood flour has been used, and I normally use a bit of corn flour, but I forgot to put it in this facing sand. Now, I only used facing sand here because people said, oh, how much better would they look with it? Well, not much. But, yeah, it was an experiment, I guess, and I'll have to remake these two. In fact, I've already remade them, or made the moulds. I haven't poured them yet. And this time I've put some corn flour within the facing sand to get rid of this problem, or at least I hope it will. Now, where did this loose sand come from? That's an interesting question. I'll just see if I can move the camera and show you on the mould I've made to replace this casting. Here is the mould sitting here, and you'll notice the sand there. That's just loose sand. I can push it off from the finger. Now that's still sitting there, despite this top box having been turned upside down at least once, having been turned on its side twice, as part of the moulding process. And unfortunately, when I've gone to put it on the mould the final time, some of this has fallen off into the cavity and produced this effect. This is one of the main reasons I do not like ridges on the outside of moulding boxes. It's just an absolute disaster and it's mess all over the place. But when it falls in and destroys your work, that's really bad news in my opinion. And I guess the worst of the bad news is that I have to replace these two. As I say, I've got the moulds made, but I've still got to pour them, and that might be a day or two yet before I get it. So, beware of this sort of defect. Quite common in foundries, unfortunately. If you get it, wood flour in the sand, a couple of percent of wood flour, 1%, or corn flour as I use, may help you get rid of it. Fine sands are more prone to it than coarse sands. It's worse with hard ramming, and I believe it's worse with drier sands, but I'm not too sure about that. And again, beware of hard ramming here, because I've just completely closed the permeability of the sand up here, and I mean it has to have some. The steam from the sand's got to get out somewhere. Anyway, the two moulds are made. I'll pour these in the next couple of days, and then hopefully we'll have our 16 moulds, 16 moulding box sides, and we can get to the business of finishing up some of these moulding boxes. Now that we have our box side castings, stay tuned for part 6, the machining, coming out shortly. Thank you for watching.